Hello, everyone. Such a pleasure for the first webinar of the year to be with all of you from around the world today to discuss what I think is the fundamental topic that we are going to be confronted to in procurement in the coming years. So I'm Hervé Legendre. I'm Research Director at EIPM, and really a great pleasure today to investigate the topic of decarbonation, digitalization, deglobalization, time for systemic innovation. So just a couple of words about EIPM. EIPM is a school with a global reach. We can deliver a number of assessment tools to assess capabilities and competencies of buyers, but also the maturity of organization. We have a complete set of education program that can be combined to build academies for company. And we invest in research and run a number of events every year in order to mainstream some of the latest development for the procurement profession. Today, the agenda is really about multiple dimensions. The first one is I'm going to come back on innovation capabilities and what do we do in procurement to bring innovation. And then I'm going to put that into a new context, the context of decarbonation, digitalization, and deglobalization. And my conclusion is going to be we need to have a more systemic approach to innovation because of the nature of these changes that are transforming our global supply chain and value chains. I'll be sharing also with you, and that's really important, some very practical, concrete best practice that I think you can implement. And I'll be sharing some insight about this broader perspective on systemic innovation. This year is, the 10th anniversary of research conducted at EIPM on the topic of innovation. We've been, doing some early studies on procurement and innovation, publishing academic articles, looking at innovation culture in procurement, recently released observatory on decarbonation, and I've published for the IFPSM, the International Federation of Purchasing and Supply Management Conference that was taking place in Florence this year, an article that we can share with you at the end of this webinar that really address the topic of today. And how does procurement seize innovation most of the time? Well, it's about one buyer working with one supplier. It's a bilateral game, It's a very classic way of thinking about, supply chain, where you take, the next player down the chain as your supplier, and you're trying to get innovation from this. However, the world is, changing these days. And we might need to have a more systemic view, taking into consideration many more interdependencies. To illustrate that, I'll be taking an example. If you're a car manufacturer and you're looking at batteries, you can look at the market. This is a few statistics from the Visual Capitalist website and, showing what's the state of the market in terms of battery manufacturers. But if you think of a battery for an electric car, well, there's a shift going from 12 volt to 48 volt. But all of this depends on the possibility of gaining access to 48 volt components within the car, whether this is the heating system, the cooling system, and any other components that uses electricity. Will there be a shift to 48 volt, for instance? Also, if you're looking into, sourcing batteries, well, you've got a challenge in terms of compatibilities with electric grids. This is not the same way of connecting to the chargers, for instance, and you need to have enough electricity available. And, to have a decarbonized car, you need to have a sustainable, renewable energy accessible on that grid. Also, we all know that there's so many challenges associated to raw materials that we need to consider the source of raw materials. And a lot of companies are already making some investment and developing some new types of contract with lithium manufacturers, for instance, in automotive. And recycling is becoming a big challenge in terms of the batteries. And in Europe, for instance, this is going to be by law mandatory to implement recycling schemes around your batteries. So the whole story is simple. It's not just about accessing, battery from one provider. It's about understanding how that battery is part of a broader ecosystem that might be evolving in different directions over the years, depending of what's happening from a recycling, from electricity voltage architecture, and a source of a raw materials point of view. That's where we need to have this more systemic view of the market and not simply look at what we buy. And today, as product architectures are changing because of some of the trends we're going to be talking about, the industry architecture are in transition, and the bilateral view of the world is changing. So we need to have this more systemic view. And what's interesting is there's a big connection to the top management agenda these days. A few days ago, there was a release of this survey of a CEO by PwC, and they say that 45% believe their company won't be viable in 10 years. And it's not just about they need to make continuous improvement. They say they need to make a fundamental change in the way their company operates, in the technology they're using. And the trends we're going to be talking about are very constitutive of this need for reinvention in, most of the companies around the world today. And what are the CEOs saying is, in order to reinvent their company, there's a number of levers that can be activated. The second one is about establishing strategic partnership to enhance capability. Number 4 is about, the shift in global supply chain to more regional bases and clusters. And number 5 is about, adopting new technology, where procurement has a role to play in terms of, sourcing and bringing some of these complementary technologies that can be used inside the company. And the last one is about developing new product where, most of product now are jointly developed with suppliers. So I think, this way of thinking in terms of systems and this way of looking at the broader picture is very challenging because we tend to have our focus on segment, on categories, and on markets. But there's also an incredible opportunity in terms of, contributing to the bigger company agenda by addressing some of the points on these charts. So, I think this is an opportunity for procurement to lift up the game and be able to contribute to these critical, changes inside corporations that we're going to see in the future. But let's step back. I want to come back on the topic of innovation and what do we mean by innovation? Well, in fact, innovation with supplier is everywhere. What you have in front of you, this huge machine is one of the innovation that has really enabled Tesla to rapidly scale and become a dominant player in terms of electric vehicles. Because the challenge is not just about the battery technology or, the software and the electronic components. It's also about scaling up production. And every time you want to install a new assembly lines for a car, well, actually, you need to install 600 robots for the front and back body of the car, the rear and the front body of the car. And one of the ways to accelerate the ability to, set up new factories was, in fact, to collaborate with an Italian supplier of Tesla that was able to turn, transform the process done by 600 robots into a process done by 2 giga casting machines. So now the rear body and the front body of the car are being casted by some of these huge machines. And that's much faster in terms of deployment of factories around the world and helps go faster in terms of gaining market shares. And it's also cutting on cost and reducing, some of the allowing to bring more aluminum, which reduce some of the carbon footprint. And also, if you look at a bottle of champagne like the Ruinart one, I mean, a lot of the innovation around it, the packaging, and a lot of the experience around it are driven by innovation coming from supplier. So I think today, whatever we look at, there's a lot of incremental, not always radical as we can see here for the Tesla one, but more radical incremental innovation coming from supplier and sometimes some radical ones. So we've been doing research many years, last 10 years. We looked at, what type of innovation. It's not just about product, it's also about customer experience, working with supplier to enter new market, leveraging their brands, creating very resilient supply chain is also a very innovative approach. How to make it happen, I'll come back on this. And in terms of culture, it's all about procurement, favoring discovery, diversity of perspective, risk-taking, and so on and so on. So, we've put together a complete corpus of knowledge that can help understand how innovation can be delivered by procurement. But I'll come back on, some of the basics of it. The idea of procurement innovation capabilities is built around 3 things. The first is it's not just about accessing, the current requirements, but it's understanding the unmet needs of today and tomorrow. What will be required where in the future where we don't have yet, I would say, a proper solution. And then looking outside for a solution. This could be existing, but this can be new suppliers. And then turning this kind of requirement, innovation requirement, and external solution into a project that can be delivered to the business. So what has research we've conducted have shown is a very classic way to look at it in terms of the unmet needs was to have early involvement in project and to be able to create functional specification. But the most advanced company procurement is really working ahead of projects, looking at the bigger picture, looking into the future, collecting information on innovation priorities, and really understanding the unmet needs that can make a difference for tomorrow, so you can start to look on the market for solution. Very classic way that we've seen in data we've collected to access innovation is, hey, let's take our main supplier, existing supplier. They should be bringing us some innovation, and we should be having collaboration with our strategic or key suppliers. But they should already be bringing you some innovation. If they're so important to you, you should be important to them. And innovation coming from existing supplier usually is fairly incremental because it's an improvement of what they deliver. Most advanced companies are looking for new suppliers and sometimes collaborating with unfamiliar and some even multiple partners, working with startups, research centers, NGOs for sustainability topic, or bringing together a few companies together for innovation. And then how is project delivered? The classic way is to think of the cross-functional team and the SRM process that helps to, integrate the supplier in the ways of working of the company and aligning on innovation, and then, bringing the supplier in some joint product development activities. Most advanced companies go further. They have cross-company project on innovation, and they regularly organize innovation workshops with existing new supplier. And they can address not just product, but a lot of other types of innovation. Now, I think that's, you know, in a nutshell, what differentiates some of the leading companies in terms of innovation. And the ones that are doing a good job, if you're in the classic box, you know, this is still something that's, you know, good in terms of process. But most advanced ones are going a bit further on all of these dimensions, looking before, further, and, you know, coordinating project in a different ways. So I got a couple of questions here, actually 3 questions. So, you know, I can get a sense of in the room here, all over the world with us today for this, in this virtual room, where you are. So I've been asking you a couple of 3 questions actually. So you can scan the QR code and you can start to answer these questions by saying, you know, do you have a systematic process to collect innovation priorities outside of a sourcing project? Yes or no? There's another question about organizing innovation workshops. And there's another question about you know, collaborating with startups, research centers, sometimes multiple suppliers on innovation. Is this something you do? Keep it simple. It's a yes/no question. You know, if you say yes, it's something you not just done once, but you know, it's something that's not unusual. Should not be unusual. So I'm going to look to my colleague Fred. Are we getting some answers? Are people getting in? Not yet. We've decided to use Forms, Microsoft Forms today, integrated in PowerPoint. I hope technology is not going to fail us. We had a test yesterday, but I can still see no answer. Okay. So please, you know, scan the code and hey, share your views. Fred, can we click on the little arrow to see if we've got more answers on some of the other ones? At the bottom, yeah.
Just one.
Just one. So some people have been able to access, but not everybody potentially.
They say it's asked for login.
Sorry for that. Sorry. We thought it would be, you know, seamless. Now you wouldn't have to provide a login, but yeah, okay. So don't worry, you know, I'm not gonna ask you to go into, you know, some of the complete login process on Microsoft just for that. We thought you would be able internally when we did the test, that wasn't a problem, but probably because that was within the team here. Shall we move on, Fred? Yes. I'm gonna go to the next point. So next element, how to make it happen. I think one of the very important points about gaining innovation from supplier is really to be attractive. Okay, it's one thing to get a good price. One of your supplier might be giving, you know, some good price to a number of clients. But innovation, you know, co-development and investment in developing something a bit unusual and out of the box, this will only be done with one company. So it's really important to understand what is going to drive your ability to attract suppliers' innovation. Sometimes we need to think about IP ownership. We need to be able to, you know, not try to control all of the IP. If we have a certain market and the supplier is a huge company and they can be using the IP developed in other markets well, this is not going to create competition for us. So maybe the best is to have an IP agreement by which the supplier is free to use what was innovated in different markets, for instance. We can have risk sharing, revenue sharing, profit sharing. And of course, sometimes we need to invest in terms of the development or paying for prototypes in order to, be able to attract some support from some of these innovative companies. We can give them profit opportunities. We can give them more business opportunities, for sure. Also, can be very useful for them to gain access to expertise. One of the company I know have been able to get a lot of attention in terms of innovation from supplier was promising supplier to provide them within 6 weeks a complete feedback with tests done on their equipment on any electronic card that would be sent to them. For the supplier, and especially the engineers within the supplier, this was regarded as a gold, because they were sure they would be getting quick feedback on their prototypes. And sometimes, learning and development is about reputation. If you are a supplier of Apple and you're working on the latest generation of the components, this is going to create for you opportunities to sell to other companies, sell in other markets. So it's not just about the economic, it is about, some of the extra business development and expertise learning you can get out of this relationship. And then, you still need to be attractive from a relationship point of view. Some of the startups I've interviewed, they say some companies, it takes 10 months to start the discussion. I even, had someone who said, with some companies, it took them 10 people before they would meet someone, 10 meetings before they would meet someone who's really got budget power in order to make something happen. So you can burn quickly some of your resources by working with a client who's not creating that type of right access rapidly. So being attractive is not something that happens by chance, it's something that can be designed. And what I often say to my student is, it's not just about the business to business relationship. It's also about the motivation of people. The IP thing, if you can lower the IP burden discussion, then suddenly you will have the sales guy very supportive. If you provide, as I've described, feedback on prototypes to engineers, they're going to love it. And sometimes, maybe the business manager is going to be very attracted by your sustainability program because it means something also on a personal basis to them. I saw that with some company making lenses, for instance, where they were gaining attention from supplier, because of some of their sustainability activities. So have all that in mind. It's one of the fundamental aspects of innovating with supplier. It's that level of attractiveness that goes well beyond what we need for cost. Also, we need to create great conversation, great interactions, and prototype together. And there's not a single way of organizing an innovation workshops. This is a picture from the book we've published a few years ago about organizing innovation workshops. You can bring supplier in an internal fair. You can have a roadmap discussion on innovation with supplier to align, or you can suddenly start to work within the prototyping lab of your supplier. You can do visits to supplier together with stakeholders, scouting visits, or you can go together to fairs. There's plenty of ways of creating conversation interactions. And I think, your ability to pick the right one to deliver the right value is absolutely essential, but we don't have much time to go in depth onto these elements. But, let's say if you have supplier that see you as very attractive and you're looking at, incremental innovation, probably the internal fair is an interesting way of doing it. But if, you need to attract suppliers from other industry, they're far away from you and your existing stakeholder They're not really kind of sure of, we need to go in that direction. Maybe it's best to take them out to visit, to understand, and to help change the mindset by confronting them to a new reality outside and not staying in the walls of the company. Anyway, that's for me very important. These foundations exist in many companies already, and the ability to innovate with supplier from supported by procurement. But today, we got a number of challenges ahead of us. The 3Ds, decarbonation, digitalization, and deglobalization. So what does it mean? So let me start with decarbonation. I think it's really important to understand what is at stake. And the very easy way, I got that picture from 40 production line. And if we want to understand what it means, this is all about reinventing the energy, raw materials, agriculture, transportation industries. So basically, decarbonizing means transforming all the industries that have been invented, created, initiated between 1880 and 1920. These are the industrial foundations of everything we manufacture, of every service that has been built on top. That's the stake. That's the challenge we have behind decarbonation. It's nothing abstract. It's a fundamental transformation of many industries. And the best way to illustrate that is, probably most of you have come across this distinction between the emissions inside your walls and the downstream and upstream emissions. So some industry, if you take like a food company, if you take a cosmetic company, if you take manufacturers of toys or something like that, you're going to be on the right, okay? A lot of your emissions are going to be on the supply chain because, the raw materials, because the transportation, all of this is happening outside of your company walls. And you're going to be depending on deep tier supplier changes in order to decarbonize your industry. At the other hand of the spectrum, if you're making cement, if you're making steel, a mining company, if you're in agriculture, textile, chemicals, well, then a big chunk of your emissions are within your walls because you are these upstream companies that needs to reinvent themselves. So basically, the whole process of decarbonation, we're going to have the companies on the right, the one that have huge Scope 3 emission, they're going to have to do a lot of eco-design, defining their product, their services, saying we need to have very different raw materials, low carbon solutions, and we're going to have to need some circular flows. While at the other hand, there'll be investment like last week, one steel company in France announced, billions of investment in order to switch energy sources for production of steel. 1.6 or 1.8 billion investment plus security from a local nuclear power plant. So that's the whole thing, if you have a lot of Scope 3, a lot of eco-design, but also asking companies to implement circular economy, circular flows, to gain access to product where that will be decarbonized because of this deep industrial change. And to implement all these circular flows, to have information about carbon footprint, to be able to understand what's inside at the end of life in the product, we're going to have to be sharing a lot of data, and we'll have complete data ecosystem that will be covering industry. So these four things are really simply defining what's going to happen in terms of decarbonation. Design on the right, deep industrial change on the left, and these circular flows that help to reduce but also reuse and recycle many things and new flows of data to make that happen. So that's the stake, and that's not like bilateral things, it's about understanding the complete change and making fundamental shift in how we operate. Digitalization. I think there's a misconception about digitalization very often. A lot of us see digitalization as taking a software and putting it somewhere. The process of digitalization is something more fundamental. Many years ago, software was inside the copier machine or the first computer. So it was trapped into a machine. And then it started to get out of the machine. And now, there's a lot of value in the software surrounding exchange of information in companies when, the copier machines have lost a little bit their edge in terms of, their relevance and innovation and all of this. And software keeps going out. If you think of, developing product in the future, we'll have real-time distributive collaborative innovation with supplier, where supplier will be, designing product as part of an architecture supported by AI for generative design. And, we will be seeing products evolving nearly as they are being designed by a group of suppliers. We'll have intelligent supply chain where, maintenance, repair will be supported by a lot of digital solutions. And we'll have product that will be orchestrated by software, like cars, things like this. And at the end of life, as I mentioned, we'll need smart circularity. We'll need data that will help us to implement this circular economy. So basically, the software that was trapped inside product is coming out, surrounding everything, and that's one of the change we're going to have to make happen in order to deliver some of the benefit of digitalization. It's not just adding a software to something that exists. It's about a broader architecture that's really changing how assets are being orchestrated using technology. And if you look at something that looks rather simple, how do you use augmented reality for doing maintenance in multiple sites? Well, you have the hardware manufacturer. You need to find the right device, whether this is the glasses or some of a tablet like this. You will need software because you're going to have to integrate a few software together and add software functionalities. So you've got the red and the green arrow. In order to complement that, you will have data access, and this might be coming from multiple machines where everybody's been trying to trap data in machines to deliver their own software within their own machines. But if we really want to, get the most out of the data, we're going to have to entrap the data, gain access to it, building connectors to all of these machines so we can build, a sort of a digital replica of multiple machines working together. And very often related to maintenance, related to IT, we also have as part of the game. And, IT, there's also some diversity supplier that have been involved in this. So for something like this, it's not just value being delivered by one supplier. You need an ecosystem. You need multiple suppliers, to support the digitalization of activities like these ones. You need to design new supply chain, and you need to have this cross-supplier innovation. Next point is about the third, element is about deglobalization. So, currently there's a lot of companies that are looking at, regionalizing their supply chain activities, rebalancing risk across the world. They're looking at friendshoring, like going to countries they see as ally and being able to, have some contracts there. So rebalancing their source of supply across the world. But, we need to have here again a system perspective. If you're thinking of, hey, you know what? I can just bring back the production of solar panels in this country or that country. Well, it's one good thing. But next to it, when, the power of the sun is converted into electricity, this goes into an inverter. And 97% of inverters in the world are being produced in China. So it's pretty important to have that in mind, because you might have the feeling that you're bringing some production somewhere, but you're in fact dependent on the complementary product that's already still produced somewhere else. And in order to get the right level of scale, to get the economic benefit, you won't be able to make it happen just by, recreating the same type of production, but you need to be much more modern. You need to be circular in order to gain the benefit from the circular economy. So, rethinking our global way of addressing economic needs in a multipolar way is going to require to have more of this kind of ecosystem understanding of things, looking at dependencies across product. And, a lot of economic laws have been challenged over the years, but there's one that's not been much challenged over 200 years. This is the comparative advantage of Ricardo. There's really good reasons why, it's always interesting for countries to specialize in some product compared to others. So we'll see, but that's going to be a challenging move to be made. Currently, we talk a lot about in the US, all the money that's going for semiconductor, but, already TSMC is considering slowing down their project because they don't see the complete ecosystem supportive of that change, appearing fast enough, or sometimes it's appearing too fast. People have been trained to work in these factories, but they have no jobs. So synchronizing the ecosystems to deliver all of this change is not easy. So innovation and systemic innovation is at the center of this. Digitalization is everywhere. It requires cross-supplier collaboration and data sharing. And in the end, it's all about systemic innovation. Decarbonation is about innovating with lower tier supplier. It's about changing scale rapidly, so we can reinvent 150 years in 10 years. And this requires sharing data. This requires implementing this circular and alternative source. It's systemic innovation. And if we deglobalize or rethink our, recluster our economic activities, well, we need to think about this global, local ecosystem. We need to have this cross-supplier collaboration to have people with the skills, with the right, equipment, machines, and all of this working in new territories. And we need to have these alternative source and circular flows. So all of these is conducting to a more systemic approach to innovation. These 3 Ds are asking us not just to look at bilateral relations, but to open up and see the world as something a bit more complex. So how do we see the big picture? I said it before, but don't look at it as part of a sourcing project. The first key step is really to manage your stakeholders proactively. Meet the decision maker, ask them the right question, and see the big and the long-term picture. Get involved in looking at scenarios for the future. Getting that vision of, what will be the unmet needs of the future? What will be the missing capabilities that we will need to be getting outside? We need to understand the goals and the ambition of the business. We need to understand what they see as pain point and challenge, and we need to frame our contribution and asking why 5 times, why do you think it's a big issue? Why do you think it could be a problem? And this is all about gaining business acumen, understanding, the future business dimension with a complete picture, a big innovation picture. So we need to invest time in procurement, key account managing stakeholder, spending the time to build that picture, thinking like business people, and being able to assemble capabilities that are going to make a difference. We need to move from being a machine that's running project, and we need to become a knowledge hub. We need to be the place where stakeholders, where even clients are coming in order to gain access to information about innovation. So I keep telling my participants to my innovation class, well, you need to have a program, and it's got to be a systematic program to position procurement as a knowledge hub. Maybe in February, you bring a supplier that shows their roadmap. Maybe in May, you're going to have two startups that's showing the innovative stuff they're doing. Maybe in September, you run an innovation with supplier. Maybe you go to a fair together with some stakeholder and you feed back to the rest of the group through an online workshop what have been the findings. Maybe you bring an expert. Maybe you have a database and you look at all the AI companies that could be feeding your innovation pipeline in the future, and you have a way of having a common database with stakeholder to identify opportunities. You need to act as a knowledge platform where people come for knowledge. That will be making the difference. They don't come to you for a project. They don't come to you because a contract has expired. They come to you because you've got the deep market knowledge, information about innovation, about decarbonation. And decarbonation is an opportunity for us to make this happen. So think about that. How do we become a true knowledge hub where people have access to, insights, foresights on the future? And we need to have this way of ecosystem thinking. We can't just look at what we buy. We need to look beyond. So categories can trap us. Maybe we need to look a little bit beyond. Yeah, we're buying solar panel, but we need to understand what that means from an inverter point of view. Or, yeah, we have batteries, but we need to understand the consequence in terms of the market for charging station. We need to set up renewable energy for the electric grid, but, what will that mean where so many cars will be connected to it? We need to have this 360-degree view on the new architectures of product and industries that are going to emerge on the ecosystem. If we only stay at the level of the bilateral relation, we'll always be late. We need to have this broader perspective and sometimes, do cross-category innovation project, going beyond a simple one, but looking at how to assemble different capabilities. One of the case I've liked recently is a company in Saudi Arabia. They're property developer. So they hire construction companies in order to, deliver some of buildings. And what they did is they took some of their supplier to South Korea, to China, in order to look at new machines for construction with new technology that can help accelerate and make a difference in the construction process. And then they created the conditions so this supplier of equipment could be localizing their activity in Saudi Arabia. So that's really ecosystem thinking. You create a dynamic across a few suppliers that really makes a difference. And that's this 360-degree vision that we need to have on our market in order to have this broader impact that can truly make a difference. And my final advice, and this is a challenging one, and many of the students I've had in my class have said, they've remembered that from me, is that ability to snorkel and dive. Yes, sometimes we need to see the big picture. We need to see the complete ecosystem. We need to see the complete technical system. And at some point, we need to dive. We need to go and get these innovation workshops organized, prototyping, and making sure that at the end of the meeting, every single person in the room has been able to voice their views, and there's no concern that have been left under the table. We need to have this kind of strategic view of the evolution of things, but at the same time, we need to have this attention to details. So the dynamics of these workshops with supplier are really making a difference. So that's challenging, because naturally, some of us, we love to be kind in, a more strategic thinking, or we just like to be in details and actions. We need to combine that. And I think it's not just about individuals, but it's also about working in teams in procurement to be able to together deliver this type of capabilities. So I think these are the keys to go to this more systemic innovation logic. Try to give you, a few clear ways of making it happen, starting the process with stakeholder relationship. Some of them, are more day-to-day. Snorkel and dive is not something, that can be reduced as a template, but there's plenty of things we can do. To keep going on this topic, we're going to have our conference, the EIPM by Mail Group conference. This will be 27th of March, and the topic is crafting the future through innovation and sustainability. There's speakers from different countries. We'll have speakers from Ferrari Barilla, for instance. We'll have from many industries on the topic of how we combine innovation and sustainability. So how do we bring the two topics together to make a difference on the market and for our companies, not only from an economic standpoint, but also sustainability standpoint. And also, just for your information, if you're interested, I'm going to be running a class on decarbonizing supply chain in February, 2 afternoons online, so you can join. Topics is really to go deep into understanding decarbonation levers, implementing circular economy, defining some strategies for decarbonation. You need to have already a good level of understanding in purchasing, I would say, know some of the good practice in terms of strategies, SRM. And the structure is, before the course, you do an assessment of where you are in terms of decarbonation. You develop a plan. We've got a maturity assessment tool for that. Then we'll go into the why, how to commit, how to measure emission, how to integrate decarbonation in SRM, and how to understand the source of greenhouse gas emissions. And then you have, for the following session, you need to build an RFI, a request for information, in order to understand, before you start project, the stakes of decarbonation and the opportunities. And then we go in session 2 into integrating decarbonation in category strategy, circular economy, and the procurement process.